meet Ana Cecilia Reyes Valderrama. After months of research, fieldwork and collaboration, she is now presenting her final audiovisual project for the Cooperation and Global Governance course at Tec de Monterrey, Campus Querétaro. A project developed alongside a special training partner, Scholas Occurrentes, a global educational movement fostering youth participation and a true culture of encounter.
Throughout the semester, my team and I focused on the limited participation of young people in formal consultation and decision-making processes in Querétaro. Although the state has a strong economic performance and government openness, youth participation remains uneven. According to the government's Voluntary Subnational Review 2024, strengthening coordination between governmental institutions and social actors is essential for advancing the 2030 agenda. This aligns with the Scholas' own methodology, which is rooted in listening to and integrating youth's lived experiences as a tool for civic transformation. Our project matters because it addresses an urgent governance challenge: how to create institutional mechanisms that allow young people to move from being passive recipients of public policy to co-creators of community solutions. The project involves multiple stakeholders. Globally, we identify Scholas Occurrentes as an international NGO with a transnational educational network, along with the United Nations and the Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDGs 4, 10, 11, and 16, which frame youth participation as a central element of sustainable governance. At the national level, the key actors include the Mexican Ministry of Education, IMJUVE, and national youth policy frameworks that emphasize civic engagement. It is also important to acknowledge Scholas Mexico, the national branch of Scholas Occurrentes, which operates across different states and provides the institutional structure, training methodology, and coordination necessary for implementing Scholas programs throughout the country. At the local level, stakeholders include the government of Querétaro, CEJUVE, local schools, teachers, volunteers, and families. The Scholas Ciudadanías Querétaro chapter is the local implementation arm through which the program is carried out. They directly engage with the students, coordinate the state institutions, and adapt the Scholas' global methodology to the specific social and political context of Querétaro. During the 2025 edition of the program, the Scholas Ciudadanías Querétaro chapter worked with approximately 250 students from diverse public and private high schools across the state, who are the direct beneficiaries of the project. Scholas' methodology encourages young people to identify community problems, debate priorities, and propose concrete solutions to authorities. Through this process, youth develop essential civic and leadership skills that allow them to engage meaningfully with public institutions and experience direct interaction with government officials, something many students have never experienced before. At a societal level, it helps break the cycle of disconnection and apathy prevalent among young people not only in Mexico but sadly globally. The overall goal of this project was to understand how NGO government cooperation can strengthen youth participation in governance processes aligned with the 2030 agenda. In our case, this specifically meant examining whether Scholas' methodology can meaningfully connect young people with local institutions in Querétaro. The purpose of our research was to evaluate whether the implementation of Scholas Ciudadanías in Querétaro actually increased youth participation in consultation processes and decision-making mechanisms. Based on our MICMAC analysis, several success factors emerged. Number 1, political alignment between Scholas Mexico, CEJUVE, and the state's youth development agenda. Number 2, infrastructure and logistics supports provided by CEJUVE, which make the students' encounter possible. And number 3, youth engagement itself, reflected in the strong interest students demonstrated regarding their local environment and community needs. However, our analysis also identified significant limitations that could weaken or even prevent success. These include possible shifts in political priorities, weak institutionalization of participatory mechanisms, the absence of long-term monitoring systems, and the exclusion of youth who are outside the school system. Together, these factors show that while Scholas Ciudadanías creates meaningful encounters, the sustainability of youth participation ultimately depends on institutional structures that must be strengthened. In order to evaluate the impact of Scholas Ciudadanías moving forward, I propose a set of indicators at the component, purpose, and goal levels that CEJUVE and Scholas Mexico could integrate into their monitoring processes. At the component level, measuring whether the program was implemented correctly. These indicators include number of workshops and student encounters, the availability of infrastructure, and the training of facilitators. These elements are essential for Scholas Ciudadanías to function in Querétaro. At the purpose level, focus on whether Scholas Ciudadanías actually increases youth participation in consultation processes and decision-making mechanisms aligned with the 2030 agenda. Here, indicators include the number of youth proposals submitted to or follow-up by CEJUVE and the level of follow-up that these processes have. At the goal level, this includes whether youth proposals are incorporated into municipal or state development plans, whether youth representation increases over time, and whether public institutions become more responsive to youth priorities. Additionally, for Scholas Ciudadanías to have a sustainable impact, the program must be applied regularly rather than a one-time intervention. Regular cycles of the program ensure continuity, civic skills building, and stable youth engagement over time. I would personally advise expanding the program to reach young people outside formal schooling. Including them would not only increase inclusivity, but also align the intervention with the broader human rights principles of the 2030 Agenda, ensuring that no one is left behind. Expected positive outcomes include strong youth participation and more responsive local institutions. Unexpected benefits may also emerge, such as new social networks among students from different schools and increased sense of environmental awareness. However, there are also possible negative or unintended effects, particularly the risk that youth participation becomes mostly symbolic if authorities do not follow through, political shifts that may deprioritize youth participation, budget constraints, bureaucratic delays, and digital misinformation. These reflect the fragility of youth participation mechanisms and highlight the need for sustained institutional commitment. From an ethical perspective, the project strengthens young people's right to participation, education, and dignity, helping redistribute power by opening institutional spaces traditionally closed to youth. Yet it also requires accountability, transparency, and sustained institutional commitment. To ensure long-term impact, I recommend combining a blended financing mechanism with a youth-led creative initiative that builds on Scholas' tradition of bracelet making in other countries. On the first day of Scholas Ciudadanías, students could collaboratively design a symbolic item, such as a t-shirt, a bracelet, or a tote bag, which incorporates not only visual elements to their identity, but also trendy quotes and messages that reflect the values of the program. Scholas Mexico could then produce and sell these items through its existing national and international networks. With thousands of followers on social media, Scholas has the potential to launch an innovative global clothing campaign, offering high-quality, consciousness-driven apparel that supports a social purpose. This type of initiative would resonate strongly on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. The profit generated from this initiative could be directed into a dedicated youth continuity fund, ensuring that the projects designed by the students during Ciudadanías receive a follow-up, mentorship, and material support after the program concludes. If scaled, this model could grow into a global brand, one that not only raises funds, but also communicates a message of encounter, youth empowerment, and shared purpose to audiences worldwide. This approach enhances youth agency and builds a long-term mechanism capable of sustaining the transformative potential of Scholas Ciudadanías. In conclusion, this project demonstrates that when youth are meaningfully listened to and actively integrated into governance processes, their capacity to influence public decisions becomes real and transformative. Yet, the impact of this effort depends on continuity, institutional commitment, and sustainable mechanisms that allow youth proposals to thrive beyond the initial encounter. By strengthening follow-up structures and creating innovative funding models, we can ensure that young people not only express their ideas, but also see them reflected in their communities. Ultimately, this project confirms that empowering youth is not a social investment. It is a necessary pathway towards a more inclusive, just, and cooperative form of governance.
Thanks a lot for watching my video. I want to say a special thank you to Daniel Garnica, Karina Tavernier, Alberto Ugarte, Fernando Segura Millán Trejo, and Alan Cordova, and obviously to all the students and facilitators from Scholas who make my work possible.